So Jessie Long attended the Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design for undergrad. She received a bachelor's in fine arts in painting with a double minor in communication design and art history. She then worked for 2 years at the Milwaukee Art Museum, which I find extremely interesting. She was a program assistant creating art and education experiences for children and families. She then attended Marquette Law School, where she volunteered at the Marquette Volunteer Legal Clinic, at the House of Peace, at the Milwaukee Justice Center, and at the Veterans Service Office. During her law school years, she devoted her work and intern time to public service, working during the summers as an intern at the Rock County Courthouse in Janesville and at the Milwaukee City Attorney's Office, and interning during the school years at Legal Aid Society and Legal Action of Wisconsin. She joined Legal Action after graduation from law school and now is one of 2 legal action attorneys working in the Center for Driver's License Recovery and Employability, which is located at the Milwaukee Area Technical College's downtown campus. On her LinkedIn profile, Long says she has a passion for community and art and an interest in municipal court procedure, traffic law, bankruptcy, and consumer protection. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Jessie.
Thank you. That was very thorough. That's great. I should probably update my LinkedIn. So I am going to share a PowerPoint. I threw it together this morning. I realized that I'm talking about a lot of numbers and I'm a visual person. So I did this for the other visual people who make sense of numbers by looking at charts and graphs. So I will share my screen. Does that work? Are we all seeing a PowerPoint? Great. All right, so my name is Jessie Long. I am a staff attorney with Legal Action, and I work at the Center for Driver's License Recovery and Employability, and I've been there for 3.5 years. The CDLRE is a partnership between Legal Action of Wisconsin, Wisconsin Community Services, MATC, and the City of Milwaukee. We assist people who have suspended or revoked driver's licenses who are experiencing poverty in Milwaukee County, and we help them get back on the road legally with a valid license. We think that this work is really important because a driver's license is critical to employability and to employment success. A recent study found that 86% of Americans drive to work. There are a lot of jobs and job applications that require explicitly a driver's license and ability to drive, while there are a lot of other jobs that require a driver's license implicitly or it's strongly recommended. Public transportation is a great resource, but it's not perfect. There are a lot of well-paying jobs that are off of bus lines, that are on bus lines, but not connected to low-income neighborhoods. And where driving might be 15-20 minutes, a bus route could take like an hour and a half. So it's really important, and a lot of people really rely on their driver's license for work, and then of course for family rearing, health, education, all sorts of other things. A lot of employers view a driver's license as a measure of responsibility, and for a lot of folks, losing their driver's license can mean losing their ability to work, to get to work, care for their families, access medical care, and it can snowball into much greater financial concerns. So we think that the work is really important, and we think it's extra important because a majority of driver's license suspensions are not caused by safety. They are caused by poverty-related things, most often the failure to pay forfeiture suspension. So I made some charts. This is a pie chart of a 10-year average of all Wisconsin DMV recorded suspensions and revocations. This big chunk on the right, that is the failure to pay forfeiture suspension. When folks receive a traffic citation, either in municipal court or circuit court, and they don't pay their citation in time, the court can issue a driver's license suspension. It's discretionary, courts don't have to do this, but a lot of them do. And the suspension lasts for 1 year or until arrangements are made to take care of the balance. Some of the other notable sections would be points, which is the second largest, and OWIs, which is the third largest cause for all revocations and suspensions in the state of Wisconsin. This is going back 10 years, and the average over 10 years, FPFs are 53.921%. And it is the #1 cause of license suspensions every single year by a very significant margin. Here's just that same information with a different chart if you wanted to look at those numbers. And another one over time, it has gone down. The failure to pay forfeiture suspensions have gone down over the years, but you'll notice that it is still significantly higher than the other types of suspensions. So there aren't just, I didn't have time or the space to include some of the other suspensions, but I do think it's worth noting that there are other suspensions that are poverty related and financially related that are not failure to pay forfeiture suspensions. Failure to pay child support, failure to pay any forfeiture if you're a juvenile can suspend your license. So there are a lot of suspensions that are financial, that aren't big enough to show up on the graphs well. And then there are also a surprising number of driver's license suspensions that have absolutely nothing to do with driving at all. And I just broke this down into suspensions that are generally related to poverty, anything that's OWI or controlled substances. So OWIs are always like the third most common suspension, but there are a lot of other adjacent revocations that come with OWI. So I just lumped all of those together for ease. Demerit points, things that are poverty adjacent, and everything else. And then that small little blue section is just like totally unrelated. People who are getting their license suspended that have nothing to do with how they've been driving. Same thing, but in a different chart. So how do people get their driver's license back? For the people who have the point suspensions, those point suspensions last anywhere between 2 months to 1 year, depending on how many points they've accumulated and what type of driver's license they have. So a lot of times those people will just end up waiting whatever their suspension is and reinstating after that. If it is a situation where it might be beneficial to reopen some cases, that is something that the CDLRE will help people with. One of the more common things that we will reopen are these operating while suspended tickets. Operating while suspended is a 3-point ticket. And if someone has a probationary license or an instruction permit, that doubles to 6. So the threshold is 12, and that can happen really quickly. So we'll reopen those pretty regularly for our clients because a lot of our clients who are suspended because of poverty also have these point suspensions from driving without a license. For folks with the failure to pay forfeiture suspensions, the options are wait a full year for that suspension to expire, pay the citation in full, which is not an option for a lot of our clients, or request alternative arrangements with the suspending court. Courts will oftentimes be willing to set up installment plans with people. Courts will also, under certain circumstances, grant community service or maybe stay the forfeiture. Something that we've been seeing more often, some courts will send the debt to state debt collection agency and choose to lift the suspension when requested. And then other courts just won't, they'll just send the debt, past due debt to state debt collection and never suspend the person's license in the first place. Community service is not guaranteed. It is something that you can request in circuit court or municipal court, but it is not always easy to get. It really depends on the client's situation and what's going on in their life. The same thing with permanent stays and lifting the suspension for SDC. It depends on the court, it depends on the person. So after this person is eligible to reinstate their driver's license, after their points suspension is over, or after this failure to pay forfeiture suspension is over, then they need to pay a $60 fee to the DMV to reinstate their license. So money plays a pretty big role in having a valid license. It plays a pretty key role in how long a suspension lasts and how soon you're able to get back on the road legally. If you have a failure to pay forfeiture suspension, one of the fastest ways that you can get licensed again is to pay in full. If you need to set up an installment plan, or if you're requesting community service, that's extra time that you need to get court approval to find a site to complete community service. And it can add a lot of time, and it can be really frustrating for clients who need their job or need their license to go to their job and who need a job to pay for rent. So that can be really frustrating. And I also thought it was really interesting as I was going through the DMV records. They have records for all suspensions and citations over more than 10 years. I focused on just the stuff that was in the last 10 years. But I also thought it was interesting the length of time that people are suspended. So failure to pay forfeiture is a year. If you have demerit points 2 to 16, it's 2 months. If you have up to 22 points, it is 4 months. And up to 30, it is 6 months. If you have more than 30, whether you have a probationary license, an instruction permit, or a regular license, then it's a year. So you have to accumulate 31 points or more in any one given period to have the same length of suspension as someone who didn't pay a ticket. If you have an OWI, you have a 6-month revocation. So I thought that was really interesting. OWIs are really complicated. That's not something that I practice in. And I do know that there are a lot of other costs and hurdles to jump through after you get a OWI, excuse me, after you get an OWI to get back on the road. But you can get back on the road much faster than if you just don't have money. There are also occupational licenses that people can request and apply for. There are some limits with what you can get an occupational license for, like what type of suspension or revocation that you have. For OWIs, you are able to get a occupational license right away. Same thing with point suspensions. If you have a demerit point suspension, you can try to get an occupational license right away. Occupational licenses are restricted licenses that are available to certain types of suspensions, and you're able to go certain places at certain times. So it is really limited, but the DMV offers this because according to the DMV's own words, it enables you to maintain your employment and your household. So the DMV recognizes that a driver's license is really important. And even someone with a suspended driver's license or a revoked driver's license might need to be able to drive still. So we allow this for people so they can continue their lives even after a suspension or a revocation. You'll notice on this list that there is no failure to pay forfeiture suspension. That's because those are not eligible for occupational licenses. Someone can get an OWI, get revoked, reinstate their license normally with some SR22 insurance and going through those extra hoops that come with OWIs after 6 months, and they can get back on the road the next day with an occupational license. If someone simply can't afford to pay their ticket, they are suspended for a year. So that was pretty jarring, especially considering how many failure to pay forfeiture suspensions are issued each year with different courts. It's not really surprising to know that drivers who have money have more options, and that we punish people who are experiencing poverty with longer suspensions and less options. So why do we do this? We do this because we coerce payment by issuing sanctions for non-payment. Courts have a lot of options for how to handle their debt. A driver's license suspension is really common for any citation that is related to traffic. I won't be talking about it today, but there are also writs of commitment. Courts can order people to pay their citations by serving time in jail. That's not ideal. Courts can send it to tax intercept. Courts can send it to state debt collection agency, which is through Department of Revenue. So they've got a lot of powers to collect debt, and that's not perfect either. But they have a lot of options, and the failure to pay forfeiture suspension is one that is specifically to collect money. I just thought this was interesting, this quote here: the essential function of courts is to dispute resolution, not revenue generation. That is taken from the legal financial obligations in Wisconsin from 2018. And then there was also a final report and recommendations from the Chief Judge's Subcommittee on jail for non-payment of legal financial obligations, which was from June 2019. These are really interesting things to read if you've got some time. The research and the reports show a lot of information on collecting this debt, the different methods to collect debt, whether or not it's cost effective, some of the issues that come with all of these different sanctions for non-payment. It is pretty clear from these reports that the sanctions for non-payment, specifically the driver's license suspensions, are not only not effective, they are not as good at collecting on that debt as something like SDC. But there are also a lot of issues that come with suspending someone's driver's license. It's got a detrimental effect on collection efforts, and then it creates more police contact. Someone's driving while suspended, they get another driving while suspended ticket, they have to go to court again. It creates more work for police officers, for prosecutors, for court staff, and then it snowballs into this like unmanageable mess of legal debt, obligations, suspensions. It makes your driving record looks worse. It's harder to get car insurance. It's a mess. And so it's not practical. It's not necessarily ethical. It is legal, but the report and recommendations from the Chief Judge's Subcommittee does recommend that for the most part, we stop doing this, but if it's really necessary to do, they recommend that it's only done in really specific circumstances where the court finds specifically that the person is able to pay, but they're willfully not paying. So it's not the best practice. It's got a lot of other societal impacts, and even the state bar. So a lot of people are learning that this isn't necessarily the best practice. The state bar came out in 2021 and kind of agreed that Wisconsin should stop doing this. And a lot of other states across the country are getting rid of this option. So driver's licenses should only be suspended or revoked for safety-related reasons. This is a map of those different states. So the red states are states that currently allow courts to suspend folks' driver's licenses for unpaid traffic debt. The yellow is partial or temporary reform, and the green with the little triangle have a couple statutes that allow for suspensions in really specific circumstances, and the green ones don't allow driver's license suspensions for unpaid debt. I do also want to, before I open it up to everybody else, I do also want to touch on the reckless driving that happens in Milwaukee. If anybody's from Milwaukee on the Zoom call, you probably know that driving is really chaotic in Milwaukee, and reckless driving and speeding are often conversations that come up in media and the news. And there seems to be a lot of confusion whether or not driver's license suspensions have something to do with unsafe driving. Whenever a news story comes out, it seems to be, it's always pointed out if the person has a suspended driver's license. But we know from the DMV records and the Department of Transportation's yearly statistics of more than half of the suspensions coming from unpaid debt, we know that that's not necessarily true, that there are a lot of people who are driving with a suspended driver's license or who have a suspended license. They're suspended because they're poor. They're not suspended because they're necessarily a bad driver. So I do recognize that that is maybe like a question. I'd be happy to talk more about it when we open it up, but I did want to just point that out. I do also want to say something quick about the demerit point suspensions. So demerit point suspensions, I think, are typically what people think of when they think of suspended licenses because you're a bad driver. But demerit points can come from all sorts of different things. It's not always speeding or reckless driving. One of the more common citations is actually operating while suspended. And that is, I think it was like top three most common suspensions, or not suspensions, I'm sorry, most common citations. But when you look at how often people are suspended and why people are suspended, it becomes a little harder to defend that as a safety related citation when people are suspended because of non-payment. So I think that one of the steps that we need to do towards reckless driving, towards resolving the reckless driving issue that we have, is not suspending people's driver's licenses for anything other than bad driving. I think that it changes the attitude that the public has towards suspended driver's licenses. I think it's difficult to take it seriously hearing someone's driving on a suspended driver's license when I know that people are suspended because of poverty. And it also just creates more police contact. It creates more work for our courts and our prosecutors and our police. If we stop punishing people for driving while suspended because they're poor, then we can focus our resources more on the people who are going really fast or reckless driving or driving while intoxicated. So that's my 2 cents on that. I just wanted to throw that in there before we open it, because I know that it is often brought up in correlation to driving with a suspended license. So that's pretty much everything that I have specifically planned to talk about, but I would welcome any questions, comments, or concerns. And that is my email if you wanted to chat afterwards.
But I have had a judge tell me that suspensions and jailing for unpaid tickets gets those people who can pay to pay up. There are certain people out there who just won't pay until they're forced to pay. And so we get those people to pay by having suspensions and warrants for arrest. And so how do you counter that in just with the data, or do you have any other ideas for kind of countering that attitude that this, that we need to have some kind of penalty or else people won't pay at all?
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure there are people that just don't want to pay and won't. I think I would refer them back to the Chief Judge's subcommittee report. And I should have included it. There's a graph that they had where they showed counties that regularly suspend people's driver's licenses for non-payment and counties that don't do that, and their success in collection. And according to the Chief Judge's report, counties that suspend people's driver's licenses for non-payment collect less. So it is not as effective statistically. There might still be people who will intentionally not pay unless they are absolutely forced to, but that was also made an exception in that report, where if people are willfully not paying, perhaps that is an egregious situation where the court can issue a driver's license suspension, but that should not be the norm. It should be for really specific circumstances, and the court should be making a really specific finding that the person has the funds to pay, but they are willfully not doing it. So if the court thought that that was the best court of action, then they can feel free to do that, but it's not typically what's happening. It's not the average.
One of the things that I've heard from people who do the work you do is that one of the common issues that people have in terms of getting these citations is that it really kind of stems from sort of a racial place where it's, you're getting ticketed for driving while black or brown. I'm curious, are there any studies that have been done to show the sort of collective impact that those sorts of practices by the police can have on people in these situations, and if there's any movement either locally or nationally to actually try to address that in terms of some affirmative action or litigation against the institutions that are actually implementing that sort of problematic practice.
There is a pretty noticeable outcome difference between white drivers and Black, Indigenous people of color, specifically men. There was a study in 2012 that showed that Black men were 4.5 times more likely to have a suspended driver's license than white men. Latinx men were 3.2 times more likely to have a suspended driver's license than non-Hispanic men. And I don't think that it's any surprise to anyone on this call that folks of color are experiencing more police interaction for less severe, like less problematic actions. Black drivers are more likely to get stopped by police than white drivers, more likely to get tickets. And these racial disparities continue in Milwaukee Police Department's traffic stops, even in spite of the 2018 settlement, Collins versus Milwaukee. So there has been some action, but it's not done. It's not, the problem hasn't gone away. So I'm not sure what the next steps would be, but there definitely is some racial, I'm struggling to come up with the word. There's a lot of racism and structural racism at play. So I'm not sure what the best solution is, but it is definitely there.
This is just something I'm not particularly familiar with, but do you know if counties or courts ever engage in garnishment to try to collect on, fines and stuff like that?
Yeah, so that's one of the things that can happen if a court chooses to send their unpaid debt to state debt collection. SDC has a lot of powers available, and one of them is garnishment. They also intercept state taxes, and they can actually levy your bank account as well. So they have a lot more power than your average debt collector, and they do definitely garnish people's wages. And a lot of our clients file their taxes and never get a cent from their state tax returns. I haven't had a client that experienced this, but one of my colleagues did, where their bank account was just drained. They got paid and their bank account was just drained from SDC. So it happens. They have a lot of power, and unlike a lot of other debt collectors, they have less things that are protecting. There are less protections for people who are poor.
Thank you. So kind of as a follow-up question, have you gotten a sense from clients whether garnishment or whether it's bank account or wage or losing their driver's license, whether one of those is more disruptive in general to their life, or are they both just quite disruptive in different ways?
I think it depends. It's something that I will ask a client what they prefer. There are some courts like West Allis Municipal Court, for example. If you ask them to lift a suspension and just leave the debt in SDC, they'll do it. Sometimes they'll take the debt out of SDC and put up a payment plan for our clients. So I always ask them, and I let them know kind of what the consequences will be, because if you request a payment plan for a court and they lift the suspension, once you stop making payments, if you miss a payment, if you're late, the court can and usually will suspend your driver's license again. So for folks who don't have reliable income, that's not always the best option. However, it's not pleasant to have your debt with SDC, But there are also a lot of clients who are like, I never see my state taxes anyway, and I don't actually have a bank account, so I don't care. For those people, leaving it in SDC might be perfectly fine. It just depends on the person and what their life situation is. Oh, thank you, Susan. So I'll just read what Susan wrote in case someone doesn't have their chat open. Garnishment doesn't generally lead to police contact, new traffic tickets, job loss, inability to get jobs, and that $60 reinstatement fee. So yeah, for a lot of people, SDC, as imperfect as it is a better option. Certainly a better option than putting someone in jail. I think we would all agree that that's probably one of the worst options. But yes, it's not perfect, but it is oftentimes better than suspending someone's license.
Yes, hello. Good work, Jessie. Good work. I have a question in regards to the chart that you presented. Now, so the green states and the red states, could you just give me just a brief, okay, what does those represent for a minute?
Thank you. That is a map. I'll share the link in the chat so you guys can check it out. It's actually, I just pulled it from freetodrive.org. And they keep track of which states are suspending people's driver's licenses for non-payment. And they have that handy little map. And it's interactive, so you can look at it. But the green states are states that are no longer suspending people's driver's licenses. They're not revoking or prohibiting anybody from driving for failure to pay. The red states, like Wisconsin, have that as an option. Courts are allowed to suspend people's driver's licenses for non-payment. The yellow states, have partial or temporary reform. So they're working on it in some way, shape, or form. And the green states have suspensions as an option for non-payment, but they have some restrictions on how it happens or in what circumstances it happens. So it's kind of like an in-between for those egregious situations.
How many of your clients are, returning citizens or people who have come from prison who are facing these suspensions?
That is a really great question. And I don't have the numbers, but I would be really interested to see what that would look like. There was another study, I'll just mention it because it's very important, integral to the CDLRE. A driver's license is the second most important thing for employability for Milwaukee County men, second only to history of incarceration. So it is really important. There's a lot of connections and ties there, but I don't have the numbers. I would like to see them though.
Jessie, you talked about, reforms and, suggested reforms, one being, not tying the points to non-driving offenses. But do you see or have any other ideas about, the amounts of certain tickets or other ways that, if FPF, it makes up such a large chunk of those pie charts, like what other reforms can be done?
Yes, so also sourced back to that same, the subcommittee, the judicial subcommittee. So these tickets aren't easily able to be paid by people experiencing poverty because they're so expensive. And it's not all going towards the court. It goes towards a whole bunch of things that are not related to your citation. It goes to court costs. It goes to, I think, like it's on the DMV website. It goes towards like drug testing. So these are all like statutorily set. Courts can't, even if you give somebody a $0 forfeiture, it's not going to be $0 because there's all these extra things that are added onto it. So statutorily, that could be changed as well. We could limit what type of extra fees go into these traffic citations so people aren't paying for other parts of the legal system that they're not involved in. So that could be something too. I know that in that report, in those recommendations, they did recommend that nothing else be added because it's already getting to be so expensive. But surely there could be some cutting that's not my decision. I don't know enough about budgeting to have an informed opinion on that, but people can't pay them because they're too expensive. So even if we didn't get rid of failure to pay forfeiture suspensions, which I think would be maybe the easiest option, a most effective option, cutting down on what costs and fees get associated with those forfeitures would help too.
I thought I'd just ask because sometimes people are surprised. Do you find that it's necessary to have an attorney do this work? Like for a person who's clearly meeting the statutory definition of poverty, is it difficult to get these issues resolved? Is it necessary to have an attorney involved in this work, in your opinion? Is it beneficial to have a structure that provides that in the county of Milwaukee?
Thank you. Yes, I think it is very, I wish it weren't important or necessary. I think it is. I wish my job didn't exist. I wish that I wasn't needed, but a lot of times our clients have tried to resolve this stuff on their own and are unsuccessful. There are a lot of people operating in the system that are operating under incorrect information, operating with outdated information. I've looked over this last year, I spent a lot of time looking at different court websites to see what information they provide to people visiting their website about these driver's license suspensions and warrants. A surprising amount of them said that payment plans are not an option, even though they are a statutorily required option for people experiencing poverty. There are a surprising amount of websites that still say failure to pay forfeiture suspensions are 2 years, which is not the law anymore. I, as an attorney, have even had conversations with folks in the system about these things. I had a court clerk argue with me that my client should be suspended for 2 years. And I was like, no, that's not the law. So it is really difficult to navigate. And if you don't have a background in this, if this isn't what you're doing every day 9 to 5, you might not know that you have other options. You might not be confident enough in arguing with the court clerk that the information that they're providing on their little pamphlet is inaccurate. And it's a lot to deal with. And especially if you have issues in different courts, in different municipal courts and circuit courts, looking at someone's like driving abstract and figuring out like which suspensions are coming from what, where these points are coming from, if something is going to cause a point suspension. It can be really difficult to navigate, and it's not as transparent as it probably should be. But theoretically, no, people don't need an attorney, but I do think for a lot of people, it's really beneficial. And I think a lot of people would be suspended for a really long time without like our program. And not to toot my own horn, I've only been here for 3.5 years, but I do think that the work we're doing is really important for people in Milwaukee County.
Jessie, how do people find your program? How does somebody get to you? Your legal action, I know that there are certain, financial requirements for your help, but do you offer other services where people can, get information from you, even if they don't meet your requirements? And how do you get your clients, and how do we advertise at WJI that your program exists and that people should go to you to find information?
Yes, absolutely. So we get our referrals from a few different places. One of them is the mayor's office. People can call into the mayor's office and then they'll be referred to WCS. Most, if not all of my clients are also people working with Wisconsin Community Services. We have case managers with WCS and they kind of help people stay on top of their deadlines, their payment plans, their community service, help them sign for the road test and everything like that. So WCS will sometimes refer people to the program. Legal action, if someone calls generally the legal action intake and they have a driver's license problem and they're eligible, they'll get routed into the program. We also do some advice events. We actually just had one the other week or two ago, where it's just a general advice event. We'll pull up your driving abstract. We'll look at what's going on. And even if you're not eligible to enroll in our program, if you have an issue that we can't help with, or if you are over income or something like that, we can still give you advice on how to proceed, and then pull up some information for them so they can walk away feeling more confident that they can resolve whatever issue it is that they're facing, or if necessary, we'll send people to like the private bar if it's something that we just can't help with.
So Jessie, you made mention about a lot of, you run across a lot of misinformation that people have been running across. Now, do you have any form of a print-based fact sheet or any digital-based fact sheet that's kind of dispels that the miscommunications?
I have been slowly working on a spreadsheet. I printed out or I put on this spreadsheet every municipal court, and then I filled in if something was out of date, if something was incorrect. I don't have it available for everybody to share. That's not something that I've been specifically working on, but I do, when I run across it, I save a little screenshot for myself in case we do decide to do something. It is something that we're always working with local courts. There are some courts that we're just in more often. So it is something that we're working on with local courts to make sure that they're aware of any changes, to make sure that they're following the updated laws. One of the ones that we've had more recently is whether or not property hearings are being recorded. So that's something that we try to monitor in the courts that we're working with. We don't have that information publicly available, though. We don't. It's more internally, I guess.
I know the WJI had put forth for some brochures that, dealing with, the rights, when you're dealing with the municipal courts. And we had it in English and they had it in Spanish. And, I had a lot of those brochures placed all over West Allis in various spots and in various, community places in Milwaukee, in, high poverty areas. And that basic information, majority of people did not know. They did not know that they had those kind of rights in dealing with, the municipal courts. And so it would be an excellent idea, because there's a lot of misinformation out here, to be able to get, some of them, corrected facts, in, community centers, churches who are willing just to have it available, but the places where the common people are, who are commenting to these issues more so than the others. So it's just that'll be an excellent idea, when, time, get the time to do so, just to get some print based out and distribute it, or have someone distribute it in areas where people can see this and, oh, you know what? This is an option for me. I was told it was not an option. And, people, spread, not intentionally, but they just spread bad information around because of just a lack of knowledge.
That is a wonderful point. We're always looking for outreach opportunities in the community. So I am going to start that and see if there's something we can do to circle back to it. Thank you.
This is actually more from Margot and Roy. That brochure is so wonderful. And I can't recall whether anybody has tried to get it into the municipal courts themselves or how that has been received, because I mean, obviously the people who are most in need of information on their rights in municipal court are the people who are in municipal court. And I wondered if municipal courts had allowed that information to be distributed, or if you tried.
So, so for those who don't know on this call, I am the Shorewood Municipal Judge, and Shorewood has the brochure. We have it at every court session. We have it available. And then it's there's a link to it on our website too. And in fact, I think it's the Spanish one we've reprinted entirely so that it's right on our website. But when the brochures came out, or maybe when it was after I was elected as judge, I sent it out to all judges on the listserv statewide. So they all got an electronic copy. Whether they've used it or not, I cannot tell. But anybody who is on the judges listserv, you know, should have gotten it a couple years ago from me. Maybe I should send it out again. And you know, it is available for any judge to have. I just haven't gotten, you know, I still have probably maybe 500 of them, maybe 1,000 of them in my basement office, you know, just waiting to be distributed. You know, any judge who wants them, I have some to get to them, but I just haven't heard anybody asking for them yet. But the information is available on our website, on WJI's website, under the municipal courts page. So, so people can look it up there too. Which courts are the high suspenders, and, you know, for advocacy purposes, and which, you know, which judges seem to do it more often than others. Do you have that? I mean, do you just kind of keep an internal record like that?
Yes. So there are a lot of places that just do it automatically. There are others where I'm assuming it's maybe there's like a little more thought involved with whether or not someone's suspended. I definitely am in some courts far more often than I'm in other courts. I keep a little spreadsheet of just for like motions and things like the prosecutors and then like the judges and kind of habits or what courts are willing to do. Some places are more likely than others to grant community service. Some judges will even offer that at the time of sentences or sentencing. I keep record of all of that. And I have actually even had a prosecutor give someone that they were in court with my direct number. It was like, I don't know, call this woman and like see if she could do something. So there are plenty of people in the system who are also working to change it. It's not just like us at the CDLRE. But yeah, there are definitely some courts that are more difficult to work with than others.
All right, any final questions? We have time for maybe one more. All right, hearing none, I thank Jessie for joining us today. And for those who missed today, it will be up. You can tell people if they ask you about it, it will be up on our blog probably next week sometime. And our next salon will be in January, probably mid-January. Speaker yet to be determined, exact date yet to be determined. I'm going to be working on that in the next week to get that set up. But we're right around 1 o'clock. I want to keep everybody's afternoons, rolling here. So we'll get off a couple minutes early. And I just wish you all a good, happy holiday season, and we'll see you in January. Again, thank you, Jessie.
Yes, thank you for having me. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, everyone, have a good afternoon.